And we ought to be able to talk about the things in which we invest. And those are the things that will not produce any short-term return. The return is way down the road. And we ought to stop trying to say that you should invest in early childhood and early care and early learning because there's some immediate return. We ought to say, no, there's not an immediate return. But over time, the society improves significantly. The human capital stock of the society is significantly strengthened if we make these investments today. We've got to be able to have a frame. Now, that's a role we can play. We can say that this is not just about cutting and capping, it's about cutting and capping and taxing and growing and doubling down and investing. But we've got to have a more coherent message. We've got to be willing to put some things that we care about on the table. We have gotten into, somebody called it programitis. We have gotten into defending individual programs and not defending results, goals, outcomes, and targets. And that, I think, in this environment is a fairly dangerous and unsuccessful strategy. And we are in an era that prioritizes politics over policy. And until and unless we change that, we are not going to make any significant progress on the things we care most about. And that's why I argue for this so-called common sense consensus. And the first thing you've got to do to talk about it is lead with personal responsibility. We demand personal responsibility in our own families. We should demand personal responsibility with respect to ourselves, and we ought not to cede ground on personal responsibility. We ought to say personal responsibility matters and matters a lot. I suspect that what's really going on is we all have in our family that lovable scalawag that our kids really look up to, and we think that they're nuts. You know, the last thing, we don't even want him or her around our kids, but they've got such a great personality. We all have, and by the way, if you don't have one in your family, I've got a couple extras I'm willing to share. And we have a real sense that we do not want a public policy that rewards that bad behavior. We've got to make the business case for the things we need. You know, a lot of us care about social justice, but the fact of the matter is we have got to begin talking about the cost of failure, the social costs, what happens. There's some really good data about the cost to San Diego, of not having X number of kids graduate from high school, about the cost of the gross national product of the lower productivity of so many citizens. We have got to keep our eye on the social justice concern if that's what drives us. But we've got to sort of get off our high horse and stop believing that people who don't share our view of social justice are just plain old wrong. You know, and we've got to find ways to engage and persuade them, and making the business case on data makes a lot. We've got to change the frame. You know, we constantly talk in terms of need. We've got to talk in terms of opportunity. And we've got to figure out how we stop blaming folks and begin problem solving. We've got to anchor our message in shared values such as work, family, faith, fairness. We've got to figure out what the messaging is that brings people into the tent and doesn't exclude them, which is one reason why I always say that we really got to get rid of, we cannot have policies that are about class warfare. We've got to bring people into the tent, not kick them out. And we've got to promote a policy and practice agenda around shared ideals. And we've got to sort of understand the alignment, and this goes, Nancy, to the P's, because another way of looking at the P's is really trying to get the maximum or the optimal alignment among policy, program, and practice. And what we know is that you could have the best program and bad practice, and that'll take care of the good program. And we've seen it happen time and time again. So what you've got to do is get this alignment, this virtuous alignment among good practice, good programs, good policy. And that's one of the really, really hardest things to do. So let me offer this set of thoughts as a way to celebrate the decision you've made to focus on poverty, as a way of encouraging and nudging and pushing you forward to think in more hard-edged terms about what's the problem you're trying to solve. Can you name it? Can you frame it? And can you put a stake in the ground around something that's measurable, concrete, and specific? Can you hold yourselves and hold each other accountable for not only good outcomes, but impact? Can you figure out how to move from shared aspiration to shared accountability? Can you figure out how to message what you're doing in such a way as to build a common sense consensus? And can you do all that at a time when our nation is mired in a frame that will prioritize debt and deficit reduction? Our legacy should not be the perpetuation of poverty. It should be a legacy where we ended poverty and created an opportunity for our kids that we didn't have in our generation. That's the aspiration for a legacy. That's the work you're doing. It's noble work, and I congratulate you for taking it on. Thank you.